We entered the forest just after sunrise. There were three of us: Mark, Dave, and me, and the dog. At first, nothing felt wrong. The trail was clear, the air was still. The kind of quiet you expect when you're far enough from roads and towns that the world feels smaller. We walked in a loose line, close enough to hear each other move. Close enough that no one should have been able to drift away without being noticed. A fox crossed the path ahead of us. It stopped. Not far, just long enough to look back. The dog slowed and lifted its head. No one said anything. We waited for the fox to run. It didn't. It turned and walked into the trees like it had already decided where it was going. We kept moving. It wasn't until much later that one of us realized something was missing, and none of us could remember when it happened. The trailhead wasn't marked. No sign, no map board. Just a narrow break in the trees where the ground had been worn down by boots and tires over the years. It was the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you already knew it was there. The forest closed in almost immediately once we stepped past the tree line. Tall pines, dense undergrowth. The light thinned out fast, even though it was still early. The ground was soft with needles and damp earth, absorbing the sound of our footsteps. The dog stayed close, moving ahead of us by a few steps, then circling back as if counting. Its leash stayed loose. It wasn't pulling, it wasn't hesitant either. We weren't talking much. There wasn't a reason to. The forest had that effect. Not silence exactly, but a feeling that conversation would echo longer than it should. Every now and then, a branch snapped somewhere deeper in the trees. Not close, not far. Just enough to register. Mark walked slightly ahead, setting the pace. Dave stayed a few steps behind me, close enough that I could hear his breathing when the path narrowed. We stayed in sight of each other. That part mattered. The dog stopped once, sniffed at the ground, then looked back at us. Its ears were forward, alert but not tense. Nothing moved, no birds lifting from the branches, no small animals darting away. The forest felt occupied without being active. After a few minutes, the trail bent slightly to the left, and the trees thinned just enough to open the space around us. The light shifted. Shadows stretched longer across the ground. Mark slowed down. Not abruptly, just enough that we all adjusted our pace without speaking. We were still together. All of us. And there was nothing yet that suggested that wouldn't stay true. We left the trail without anyone saying so. It wasn't a decision as much as a gradual shift. The ground stopped showing signs of regular use. The trees grew closer together. The forest floor became uneven, roots breaking the surface in long, looping patterns that forced us to watch where we stepped. The dog adjusted immediately, moving closer to Mark, then back toward me, then pausing in the middle as if unsure which position it was supposed to hold. The light continued to thin. Not dramatically. Just enough that the forest felt deeper than it should have been for the distance we'd covered. I checked behind me out of habit. Dave was still there. A few steps back. Close enough that I could see the outline of his jacket between the trees. Mark was ahead, visible through the gaps in the branches. Nothing had changed. That was the strange part. We moved for a while without speaking. Time felt stretched in a way that made it hard to estimate how far we'd gone. The forest absorbed sound so completely that even our movement felt muted, like we were walking through something thicker than air. The dog stopped again. This time, it didn't sniff. It stood still, head tilted slightly, listening. I waited for it to bark. It didn't. Mark turned halfway around, just enough to look back at us, then faced forward again and kept walking. No comment, no signal to stop. We followed. A fox appeared between the trees to our right. It stepped into view slowly, deliberate, its movement smooth and unhurried. It didn't bolt, it didn't freeze. It looked at us. The dog's posture changed, not aggressive, not fearful, just focused. The fox held our gaze for a few seconds longer than felt natural, then turned and moved deeper into the forest, slipping between the trees without sound. No one said anything. When we started walking again, I noticed that our spacing had changed. Mark was farther ahead than before. Dave was closer behind me. Not by much, just enough to feel different. I thought about saying something. I didn't. At the time, it still felt like nothing. It happened quietly. No moment of panic, no sudden realization, just a pause that lasted half a second too long. Mark stopped walking. Not abruptly, just enough that the movement ahead of us broke its rhythm. I almost walked into him before he turned around. "Hold on," he said. It was the first time anyone had spoken in a while. The dog stopped too, standing between us, leash slack. Mark looked past me. Not at me, past me. I turned, expecting to see Dave a few steps back, adjusting his footing or checking something on the ground. There was no one there. For a moment, none of us moved. The forest didn't react. No birds, no shifting branches, just stillness. Mark frowned, scanning the trees. "He was right behind you." I nodded without thinking. "Yeah." The dog turned slowly, nose lifting, then lowering again. It took a few steps back the way we'd come, stopping near a tree and waiting. I called Dave's name, once, then again, louder. No answer. The sound didn't travel the way it should have. It felt swallowed almost immediately, like the forest had closed around it. Mark took a few steps back along the path, scanning the ground, the trees, the spaces between them. "There's no turnoff here," he said, not confused, certain. I looked down at the forest floor. Our tracks were visible, 3 sets of footprints, clear enough to follow. And then, without any sign of disturbance, there were only 2. No scuffing, no deeper impression, no indication that someone had stepped aside. Just fewer tracks continuing forward. The dog sat down, not abruptly, not anxiously. It sat and waited, facing the empty space where Dave should have been. Neither of us told it to move. Neither of us wanted to. Because standing there, looking at the ground, we both understood the same thing. There wasn't a place where Dave had gone missing. There was a place where he had simply stopped being part of the count. We didn't move at first. Not because we agreed to stop, but because neither of us knew what direction made sense anymore. The path ahead looked the same as it had minutes earlier. The way back looked unchanged too. The forest gave us no indication that anything had happened at all. Mark checked the ground again, tracing the footprints with his eyes, then looking up at the trees as if expecting something to be different above them. "There's no break," he said quietly. No sign he stepped off. I didn't respond. I was watching the dog. It remained seated, body relaxed but alert, gaze fixed on the space behind us. Not the ground, not the trees, just the air. I called Dave's name again. This time, I waited longer before speaking, like the timing might matter. Nothing answered. The forest stayed neutral. No birds returning, no movement from the undergrowth. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, then continue as it had before. Mark took a step forward, then stopped. "If he turned around," he said, "we would have heard it." He didn't finish the thought. We stood there longer than either of us would admit later. Long enough that the light shifted again, shadows stretching farther across the forest floor. Time was still passing, just not in a way that felt connected to us. The dog stood up and moved a few steps backward, stopping near the place where the tracks had ended. It didn't pull. It didn't resist. It simply waited there. Neither of us told it to come back. I don't know how long we stayed like that, but eventually, without discussing it, we both came to the same understanding. Whatever had happened, it wasn't something we were going to find by standing still. And whatever had taken Dave hadn't left anything behind for us to follow. We started walking again, not forward, not back, just away from the place where the count no longer worked. The forest didn't change as we moved. The terrain stayed familiar. Trees spaced the same way. Ground soft underfoot. Nothing to suggest we were leaving one area and entering another. And yet, every step felt deliberate in a way it hadn't before. The dog walked between us now, close enough that I could feel the leash tighten slightly whenever one of us lagged behind. It kept its head low, ears turning at sounds we couldn't quite place. I tried to reconstruct the last clear memory I had of Dave. Not a conversation, not a specific action, just a position. Behind me, close enough to hear, close enough to matter. The harder I tried to fix that image in my mind, the less solid it became. It wasn't fading, it was thinning. Mark spoke once. Quietly, more to himself than to me. There should be more noise. He was right, the forest hadn't gone silent, but it had lost its variation. No sudden movement, no layered sound. Just a single, even presence, like a room with the air turned on and nothing else happening inside it. The dog stopped again. This time, it didn't look back. It stared forward, body angled slightly toward the trees, tail still. I followed its line of sight. There was nothing there, no shape, no shadow, no movement. And yet, the sense that something occupied that space was undeniable. Not watching, just present. We didn't approach it. We didn't acknowledge it. We adjusted our path without speaking, giving that area a wider margin than the terrain required. As we moved past it, the pressure in my chest eased slightly, like we'd stepped out of something dense without realizing it had weight. The dog relaxed a fraction, just enough to be noticeable. Neither of us looked back, because by then we weren't trying to understand what had happened anymore. We were trying to make sure the count didn't change again. We reached the edge of the forest without realizing we were close. The trees thinned gradually, light returning in uneven patches until the space opened up around us again. There was no clear boundary, no marker to indicate where the forest ended and something else began. It simply released us. Neither of us spoke until we were well clear of the trees. When we did stop, it was only to look back. From the outside, the forest appeared ordinary, dense, quiet, unremarkable. The kind of place people pass by without thinking about what exists beneath the canopy. Nothing moved, no sign that someone had ever been there. We checked our phones. No missed calls, no messages, no alerts. The timestamps lined up cleanly, as if the last hour had passed without interruption. Mark made the call. He explained the situation carefully, not rushed, not panicked, just facts. 3 people entered the forest. 1 did not come out. He paused after saying it, then corrected himself. 2 people entered, he said instead. I didn't argue, neither did the person on the other end of the line. Later, the report reflected the same thing. 2 volunteers, 1 dog, no mention of anyone else, no discrepancy, no missing entry. It was as if Dave had never been scheduled to be there at all. The dog lay down beside us, facing the forest. Not alert, not waiting, just resting. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Eventually, we stood and walked away. I didn't look back again, because I understood something then that I hadn't while we were still inside. The forest hadn't taken Dave. It had simply stopped recognizing him. And once that happened, there was nothing left for the rest of us to find.